Welcome to the Touching into Presence podcast.
This podcast is for people who are interested in bodywork, empowerment, and somatic-based practices.
I am Nikki Olson.
I'm Andrew Rosenstock.
We are certified Rolfers.
Collectively, we're trained in various movement and bodywork therapies with an emphasis on somatic awareness and client resilience.
Through conversations, our goal is to share and explore mind-body paradigms to offer empowerment possibilities.
It was such a pleasure to be in conversation with Mary Bond. Mary studied with Ida Rolf from 1969 to 1972. She's an Emeritus Movement Faculty of the Rolf Institute and has been involved in the development of movement education for SI from the early days of Judith Aston to the current evolution through the work of Hubert Godard. She's the author of Balancing Your Body, The New Rules of Posture, and Your Body Mandala, Posture and Presence. She's also produced a DVD, Heal Your Posture. Since 2020, Mary has been offering online workshops for SI practitioners and other somatic educators. It's her joy to share her perspective of movement education. Links for her books are in our show notes. In today's conversation, we spoke about Mary's background as a dancer and finding the work of Ida Rolf, Rolfing, and Rolf movement history, Tensegrity and Perceptual Tensegrity, a body mandala, and how to work with Mary. There's also much more. So with that, let's begin our talk.
Okay.
Hi, Mary. One thing I want to say, besides thank you for being here, is so one of the reasons I started this podcast also was for me to get to meet people who inspired me a lot, whether they knew it or not. And you were actually one of the first names on the list. And I tried different ways to get to you and it never happened. But luckily, Nikki found a way in. So I'm really grateful. And it's one of the things we'll talk about. I know you have a new book, Your Body Mandala, which we'll talk about. But I remember the New Rules of Posture was I don't know if it was required or a recommended book for my Rolfing training. And that was such a game changer. In fact, I had a client yesterday who wants to become a Rolfer, and I recommended that book to him. And because also he was saying he's a pilot, keeps putting a pillow in his lower back. And I was like, Mary Bond, put it in the middle back. You're going to be thankful. And he's like, his mind blew open. So I'm just really grateful to have you on. We do have some exciting things to talk about, but one of the things before we go into all the stuff that you're doing now, what I'm really curious about is what brought you to this work.
Okay. Well, I was a dancer. I mean, I wasn't really a dancer. I was a dance student. I was getting a degree in choreography at UCLA. University of California at Los Angeles. And one of my roommates was getting Rolfed. At that time, there were 12 Rolfers in the world. This is 1970 or 69 or something. And my roommate was saying, look, my legs are all different, and I just went, oh, yeah, sure. And then I noticed that in the ballet class, she was doing double pirouettes, and I knew she couldn't do that. So I went and get me some of that, And then, just from various things that went on, I went to a demo that Dr. Rolf was giving, and I was at loose ends, and she inspired me so much, and I kind of finagled my way into a class. And I mostly was interested in learning to see what she saw in bodies, what she was talking about, gravity. I had a ballet teacher at the time, Mia Slavinska, and she also talked about gravity. So that intrigued me. So anyway, that's what happened basically. And I didn't really intend to become a Rolfer. I just was trying to learn things,
So I'm curious, what were you besides dancing? Because it sounds like dancing was, you were not doing it professionally, correct?
I was getting a degree and I was going to teach.
Okay.
It was going to be.
So you were already kind of in the movement world, because I always think it's fascinating. Yeah. Sometimes when we, people who become Rolfers, it's like this immediate departure and very different than what they were originally doing.
Yeah, that has always inspired me. When I used to teach they used to call it Principles Week. I don't know what they call it now, but the kind of lead-in movement week before Unit 2, I think it is. And people would, I would find out how people got interested in becoming Rolfers, and it just inspired me so much because it was so different from my own I just kind of wandered in by accident. So
that wander in, though, man, you're like one of the Rolf movement superstars. So,
and no, I'm not. I just am the one that writes books.
Oh, well, you have some.
Yeah. Well, no,
and you lead classes online and other stuff.
Yeah, it's true, but I don't know. I really like making sentences. I really like it. It's like my friends are all retiring and taking up painting and guitar, and I don't know. I can't seem to figure out what to do with myself. And it turns out I think what I'm doing is I'm still making sentences. I mean, it just tickles me so much when I get one right. And I've thought often, it's like if I hadn't accidentally met Dr. Rolf and been interested in movement, what would I write about? Would I be a travel writer, or would I be I don't know. I think I would write. And this just happens to be the thing that I'm kind of inspired to share with. I mean, all of my books have been motivated about sharing Rolf's ideas and Hubert Godard's ideas in a simple way that could be understood by the general public. I'm not talking to Rolfers, really. I'm trying to talk to people and inspire them with the things that inspired me, because I think they're useful bits of information. So, and I've got feedback from that. People who find the book in the library, and it's like I'm thrilled to pieces. Somebody's found.
I think that comes through. I mean, while we both are Rolfers and we have that view, I think I haven't actually read Body Mandala yet. It's on my Kindle queue, but I've read at least two of the other books of yours and articles, and I think the New Rules of Posture is for anybody. I've recommended to people who aren't Rolfers, who just need help in their bodies, and it's an easy way to do that. Without sounding too much of a fanboy, your writing's great. So it's you are very good at writing, and you're able to take these ideas and get them out there. Which I don't want to call you a hero. I think that's a bit maybe over, but it is. You're helping people. No. You're helping, but you help people get into their bodies more, which is in this day of age is really needed, as everyone is on them. And I know we're on our devices talking to each other, but everyone is. So I'm in Dubai right now. This is actually, people won't be able to see this. This is how people walk around. They have their phone in front of them the whole time, and they're just living on their phones when they're doing everything. They're not in their body. They're in this other experience. And so having a book to just even say, hey, read this exercise right here, try this, I think is really helpful.
I just, on a side note about the Body Mandala, I'm glad it's on Kindle, because otherwise fewer people would be able to see it. But it's really ugly on Kindle. The paper version is really quite elegant and beautiful. So
I'll buy that too.
When you come back.
Yeah. I am a book. I am a book hound. It's just obviously when I'm traveling, Kindles are easier. But yeah.
Mary, you mentioned two kind of prominent people in the Rolf movement world. Ida Rolf and Hubert Godard, and you mentioned how they inspired you. If there's others, I would love to hear a little bit, and it doesn't have to be quite extensive, but just what were the inspirational nuggets that you got from them, and that's kind of maybe shaped the way you are sharing the information to the general public?
Well, Ida, of course, it was about the line, the Rolf line. But she also talked briefly, in at least in my classes, she briefly talked about Buckminster Fuller and tensegrity. and the idea of that way of organizing structure. But I don't think she put that out publicly so much. First of all, because it was Bucky Fuller's idea and not hers, and also because I think she liked the little boy logo, the simplified, picture of it, and it was easy for people to understand the stack of blocks, right, and structural elements being out of alignment. But I think more than the line, she saw that the line was a coordination, and she didn't really, I don't think that she talked about that, but she talked about movement, and that if people didn't have some kind of homework, that's where Dorothy Nolte and Judith Aston came in to develop, the movement system for people to practice, to take away with them so that their Rolfing would be sustainable. Because it wasn't magic, it was something she saw that had to be, I don't know, maybe she wouldn't have liked the word practiced, but she had these exercises she borrowed from someplace else. I can't remember who exactly, but somebody who knows the history might remember the names. But there were these patterned exercises that she taught us. And then she taught, of course, Judith, and Judith took it and ran with it, and created her own system. But so Ida's vision, I think, was movement oriented. I think she saw that when people got organized and integrated through her system of touch, that they moved more harmoniously. My picture in my mind's eye is always animals in the wild, and how there's this synchrony to the way they run across the savannah or whatever. They're in sync. And the human bodies are not like that. They're all higgledy-piggledy, if you think about a crosswalk, right? So anyway, then, beyond Rolf herself and her recipe, I think the Rolfing principles are profound. I think those gentlemen, Sultan and Maitland and Salveson, putting together that piece of work in the 80s was a really important thing to provide some kind of foundation for the recipe, because the recipe was just paint by the numbers, do this and it works, but it really didn't explain how, why, what this was all about.
If you don't mind me just interrupting for a moment and echoing that, I 100% feel too that the principles of the 10 series or the Rolfing work is so important and so can be applied to life. I got certified relatively young. I did it straight out of college. Mm-hmm. And there was a time where after my training, and I had a short practice in Aspen for a little bit, but then I was like, is this something I really want to do? And so I had a moment where I wasn't working, but the principles just kept on coming into ways that I would make decision of does this situation offer support, or is there closure around my relationship? The importance of adaptability. And I still hold into those principles when I'm doing non-formalistic sessions, which is kind of the bulk of my work. I feel like most people who come for a 10 series are students or just kind of like the buzzword, but I find that really does help guide a beautiful session or series of sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So the principles, and then Hubert's work, the basic sense of it is that perceptual orientation affects the way you move, affects coordination. So for me, that just was really, really important, that piece, because when I first studied movement, I got movement certified with Vivian J and Jane Harrington. And it was still kind of a recipe, not exactly a recipe, but it didn't have, forgive me, Jane, but, it didn't have a theoretical foundation. It was just stuff to do. And it worked. It was great, but I guess I like theory, I guess I like foundational theory. So
same.
Yeah. So, and Hubert himself is very charismatic. At least he was. I haven't seen him for at least a decade or more, because I know he kept on teaching, and people would go and be with him in Europe. But I felt like his work might continue to expand and go deeper and be more and more sophisticated, but that the bit of it that I had was enough for most people, and that I could. And so the last two books, the New Rules of Posture and the Body Mandala, are both really based on what he taught me, both of them, but, framed in a, I don't know, just kind of a pedestrian way, I don't talk so much about tonic.
To that
tonic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Well, that's what I was going to go to, because you're mentioning tensegrity and perceptual tensegrity, and I would love to talk, explore that more. And how is that similar and different than Hubert's tonic function?
Okay. Okay. So when I was writing Your Body Mandala, what I tried to do, the mandala was like, he talks about 4 ways that the person is organized: through coordination, through structure, through impression, which is what's coming into you from the world, and expression is how you respond to the world. So in a way, you could see those as 4 points around the center, which would be like the entry points in a traditional mandala. And all those points are related. So what you sense from the world, what you take in from the world, affects how you stand and how you move and how you express yourself. And how you express yourself affects what you are willing to take in. And it also affects your structure and your movement, and on around. So it's all interwoven. And I thought that would be the basis for my conversation in this book, was to help people, especially go deeper than the New Rules of Posture, into the sensations of being oriented to the ground. That's the basic 2 is ground and space, and the profound way that we can be oriented or not oriented to the space. So, Andrew, what you said about people walking around with their phones in front of them, everybody is like living in the sagittal plane these days, not just in Dubai, everywhere. We're all just shrinking our consciousness to the size of whatever screen we happen to be looking at. And when we do that, we lose our sense of being present in the space. And when we lose that, our own personal interior space shrinks. You get smaller when you do that. You physically compact yourself. Your joints come closer together. Your muscles and fascia become short. You're just a smaller person. And I think it's contributing to more and more kind of closure and exclusivity, and less ability to look around, basically,
Yeah,
So,
I haven't thought of this, but the foveal versus focal vision of basically being so fixed on the phone or on the device that there isn't, I hadn't actually put that together. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in classes, sometimes what I've done at the end is I will have taught something all, about space and spatial orientation. And then I'll have people get out their phone and look at their phone and really check the phone and feel what they just did with their body, and then practice. Okay, now bring the space back in, find the space behind your body, find the space out to the side, find your internal space, and now look at your phone. You can do it. You just have to decide that you need to do it that way.
If I look crazy now, all I'm doing is when I'm looking at you is I'm trying to look actually in the horizon while staring at this iPad. So I don't. Yeah,
that's perfect. That's the idea. That's exactly the idea, is to be in your room, be in your space, be in your own body, and not lose yourself into this thing that you're looking at. It's one of the things that Hubert used to talk about, is how you merge with the other and then you can't have a relationship. There has to be two people, right? You merge with your phone and you're gone.
You're even now as I'm here and I'm just going wide, I feel so much better. My chest feels so much more open. I'm actually in my body in the space around me. And I'm just surprised it's taken me so long to even think about that. And knowing this information, talking to people about this in other ways. And so like that's really helpful. And hopefully people listening can do the same, but just kind of going wide. Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. I think it's really important. I think that's why it matters. But what I started to tell you is how I got the idea of perceptual tensegrity and how that's the same really as what Hubert's talking about. I mean, I think you can see it just from what we just were talking about. But just to kind of chew on tensegrity a little bit, one of the Rolfing principles is palintonicity, from the Greek word. That was because Jeff Maitland is a philosopher and he knows things like that. So he came up with that idea, which was a way of indicating balance of opposing forces within the body, which creates more depth, more internal space. And that kind of that goes along with Ida's idea of span, or she talked about span within the joints, from the German word Spannung. She liked that. So this palintonicity was a way of putting that in as a principle. And I think palintonicity is an aspect of tensegrity, really. And tensegrity is now in the general conversation more and more. So I think personally we should dump palintonicity. Sorry, Jeff, but I think that tensegrity is a much more a concept that's easier to embrace, at least for me. And so it's about, the balance between right and left, front and back, up and down, inner and outer, physically, right? Structurally. So you can see the body as a tensegrity system. And, it's really inspiring when you look at those images from Gamberto's book. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Gamberto. You've seen those, right? The endoscopic images of fascia.
Yeah. You say it much better than I said, so I'm not sure the exact pronunciation, but it's good enough.
Well, I hope so. But anyway, it just is so beautiful to look at the tensegral organization, at such a microscopic level. And then you think about Fuller, and Fuller talked about how the planets were like the struts in a tensegrity system being held together by the force of gravity. So the universe itself maybe is a tensegrity system. So you've got macro and micro and us in the middle. So I'm writing about all this stuff in Your Body Mandala. And suddenly it occurs to me that the idea of, or this practice really, of feeling the weight of yourself and feeling your orientation to the ground, and at the same time opening yourself to the environment, that is a tensegrity. It's a balance of opposing perceptions, really. And that when you do that, you're bigger. So that's how it just came to me that was what I was writing about, and that it was a thing, but I made it up. So, if you talk to the people who are really tensegrity researchers and fascia researchers, they might not agree, or they might think it's a cool idea. I don't know.
I think it goes beautifully especially with the structural integrative work, that so much can be spoken about with just about the body and having the tensegrity balance and movement and body. But often what shapes us is how we're walking in the world, how we're viewing the world. And when you mentioned that in our emails with talking points, it clicked well because, with my background and, being fully educated on tensegrity. But when you added the perceptual, that in a way kind of felt like it really encompassed the conscious and the body, and how the importance of the two are necessary. If we want our clients to, leave our treatment rooms and go out in the world and really own the work that happened on the table, that there is this idea of, maintaining openness and being able to, again, with the point of adaptability. We all, the world's getting technology driven. We're going to drop into zoning out or getting fixated on our screens. But to remember that doesn't have to be our position all day long. Like when we're out on a walk, feeling, going back into feeling your backspace and all around you to unwind whatever zero focus that we might have had with people's work. Or, my gosh, I did virtual learning with my kids last year, and they're 7. My kid is fully aware of how to operate the computer before I ever thought that would be in his life. But so I too, just from kind of my structural integrated background, watched him and be kind of had to remind him in a way that a 7-year-old kid understand of you gotta feel behind you. You gotta, it's so easy for them to get so pulled into the Zooms and all these squares of their classmates who they used to play with and interact with their teacher. They're just squared chaos in some ways. But
well, here's
I just really
I think that's great, Nikki. First of all, blessings on you for being a mom at home with Zoom school. I feel like that's just been such a difficult thing for people, everyone. But also, since you have a kid or kids, I want to share something else with you about this tensegrity notion. And I would love it if you or somebody would take it and run with it in terms of finding more ways to work with kids on not losing themselves. Because when they grow up married to the screen, that's not a very good way to begin. We at least remember personal relationships, but so one of the things that I was working with in my own kind of work with myself is the idea of vectors. A vector is a movement into space, a trajectory into space. And any point on your body or inside your body could be the initiation point of a vector, of a movement. So I could move the sternal notch. I could move my left shoulder, I could move my right ear. It's like I could create vectors on any part of my body to extend myself into space. Right? So it doesn't, it's like it doesn't have to be a movement, but it could be a reaching out into space from my left elbow and my right hip. And as soon as I do that, I have a polarity and I have a different organization. So if you move that into practicing yoga, which is what I did, I would have vectors going all over the place. So I kind of envision myself as being inside one of Gamberto's images. Like I would be inside this incredible movement of fascia going in all directions and changing as I moved. So maybe, you have the central line that you're working with, but you have maybe extend a vector of let's say you're in triangle pose or one of those warrior poses. You could extend a knee in one direction and a heel in the other direction, and your crown and your pelvic floor going in opposite directions. And it's like I would just get all these vectors going as I moved from pose to pose. So it felt like I really was in a network of space, and the space is holding me up, and my balance is much better. So it's a way to practice, because it's very hard, I think, to just say, open up your space. I mean, we know how that is, and we practice it and we teach it all the time because we're body workers and we love, teaching people that. But I think the ordinary person needs a practice, needs some way to build it into what they do. And, many people do have some kind of either yoga practice or Pilates. It works in Pilates as well. And, okay, so I actually just wrote a blog about this, my most recent blog post, which I think I put it up last week. But what happened to me is I've been studying boxing. I have a boxing coach. And I was working on this fast bag. It's like a bladder or a ball, and it has this elastic string above to the ceiling and down to the floor. So it moves really unpredictably all over the place. And I was trying to do this combination of jab, cross, jab, cross, jab, jab, cross, or whatever it was. And I was like so frustrated because the darn thing moves all over the place. And I'm getting more and more focused on getting it right. And then suddenly I went, oh my God, open up, find the space, find the studio, find the bricks on the wall. And it was totally astounding. I was hitting that thing, pop, 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 pop. Like it was like some kind of coordination button got turned on. And so then I started doing that with all the other things, kicks and, whatever. And so it's like having that experience in my movement practice could inform the rest of my, when I'm doing the dishes or talking to you or whatever. Just it's really helpful. So,
well, I think that just you gave a very beautiful example of how in a tensegrity model of holding balance and opposition in a way that you were able to get precision of hitting the bag by staying big and not laser focused and narrow.
Right. And I think,
sorry. Well, I mean, I'm just, as you were saying that, I was thinking about I kind of accidentally fell into this. It wasn't something I thought I would be doing at this stage or age of my life. But again, with the pandemic and everything, I ended up, my son and I are doing martial arts.
Oh, great.
And we have, so we do mostly on it online, because that's how I got sold onto it, because I was trying to figure out what can I do active PEG style in this virtual homeschool learning place I was in. But the studio is in Longmont, so it's still not always convenient to get there. And but we're getting into, now we know enough moves that we're getting into the sparring aspect. And I keep on thinking about, like, you know, I can get kind of laser focused on wanting to, like, you know, certain punches or kicks or whatever. But we learn these forms, and they're kind of like a martial art dance. And it feels good even when I'm kind of fumbling and I don't have it right, just getting into feeling into the dynamics of the movement. And like, as we're pushing forward, getting into a back stance and kind of holding a very spacious balance, and how that is important when, you know, in the event that we might need to take this into actual self-defense or whatnot, you have to be aware of like your threat and whatever possible threats that could be around you, or your threat and where's your escape, and holding this bigger picture. And that's going back to what you were just saying with like having success or being able to hit your target. It serves you to hold a bigger picture than just being laser and narrow in your focus.
Yeah, and that makes me think of another thing that Hubert used to talk about, which is feedback and feed forward. Feedback, we know what that is. Feed forward is the opposite. So in these examples, my feedback was working slowly in my yoga practice and imagining all these sort of invisible suspenders out into the universe, holding my various body points in alignment. Okay. But that's a slow kind of internal way of working. But what we're talking about in martial arts is feed forward. You take that feedback out into expression in the world, which is where you really need it, you know, in fast movement. Can you do it when you have to move fast? And it turns out not only can you do it, you work better when you have that spaciousness. So
it's interesting for me to hear, because when I first did my yoga training, I don't know where I got the idea for vectors. My background, when you were talking earlier about people getting into, you know, Rolfing from different things, my background was in network engineering. So I think I've always had a scientific mind of sorts. And so when I was doing poses at first, it was vector based, but very basic, you know, maybe like just arms up and this, and not even thinking three-dimensional, but also not thinking about different parts in the same dimension. And so hearing you say this is helpful. I took a training this summer with Karen McCose, and Karen was doing actually a lot of that. But Karen is, Kevin and Karen are very. Kevin can take all the words to say it, and Karen can do it in two movements and express the exact same sort of thing. She doesn't always need the words. There was one of the things where we were doing the flight of the eagle, and it was very much about, you know, ankles back, knees forward. There's a lot of that sort of similar vectoring.
Yeah, flight of the eagle is just yoga. I forget what pose that is, half moon pose or something. You know, it's
sun salutations. The whole thing is basically about how do you do a sunset. It was nice with the vectors of it. It was a nice way of thinking about it.
It's perfect. I'm sure that's probably where I picked up the way of thinking about it. Chances are good. I mean, it's like sometimes you never know, you know, where you figured something out or where it started. But it doesn't matter because we're all working on the same project, you know, which is
right.
To try to, you know, what did she say, Ida Rolf? You know, something about better human beings or something. You know, that was what she wanted.
I'm still like going back about Body Mandala. I'm so interested right now. I spent a few years living in the Himalayas, and so mandalas were a part of sort of the life. And I know that the model of the tonic function with that map you're talking about, but I've never thought of it as the mandala. So when you mentioned that before, my mind also is just like, it's very exciting. It's making my whole inside light up, because that idea of that, in which way do you come into the mandala, and knowing what I know about mandalas, I'm just very excited for this. So again, a little bit gushing, like, oh, but excited by it.
Well, it's nice because it also could inform the way you approach a client. It's like, from which one of those gates do you find entry into, meaningful body conversation with any one client? It could be, for some people it's coordination, for some people it's structure, for other people maybe it's not any of those things. Maybe it's their martial arts practice. So there's lots of different ways in, and that's why Godard's scheme, that map that he, it's like, I remember going into the first class I ever took with him, and that map was on a blackboard or something, and I went, oh my God, I'm in the right place. This is what I was looking for in terms of some kind of theory about movement. So,
yeah, and I think just that, as thinking about myself, which is what I do a lot. I sometimes get stuck. Say like I just kind of every client is different, but maybe I might sort of approach it from the same way. And I'm just thinking of having this as another resource of when someone comes in, what feels like the right way to go, and giving an option even of, and so I'm not just coming in as that, but of stepping back a bit and just having more options instead of falling into patterns that I can do because I'm a human being.
Oh yes, that is part of the whole thing. I was thinking about teaching movement, and that one of the most important things, I think, in any therapeutic situation, Rolfing, movement psychotherapy, whatever it is rapport, right? Rapport with the client. But I think that rapport includes your relationship with yourself on that particular day, in that moment. So it includes what interests you on that day, and your mood on that day, and your outlook, because those are all lenses through which you see the client. And I think that's okay, because it is about a relationship, and it's about you trusting yourself and the client, trusting you too. But I think we don't have to always approach any given problem the same way, because we might not be in the mood to do this or that on that day, but we might be more interested in something else. And I sort of feel like, well, there is a more kind of cosmic organization that we're part of, and it's all right to trust yourself. It's my 2 cents.
Well, I think that's a great 2 cents, because like I said, being in Boulder, I get a lot of students who are going through the training who need to meet their Rolf movement required sessions outside of the classroom. And because they need to do this before they advance to the phase 2, phase 3, there's still a lot of confusion of what Rolf movement is. So a lot of times they come in not even knowing what to expect, or very unclear what it is. And I think that might be a product of a little bit what you had mentioned, because I can relate to what you said about when training with Jane, that while the experientials were very impactful and very great, it was hard to to teach that and be like, why, especially when you're coming in from, when you're going through the training, you're learning the 10 series, which is so like, all right, this is what it is. This is the theme. This is their territory. And then this is how you progress. So holding those two contrasts. And so, so helping students, I don't know where, because I feel like I've been so immersed in so much Rolf movement that I think my success is just to show them that you can create structural change through movement, and just kind of let that be their takeaway. And then however way they want to maybe continue their education, if they actually do want to go into Rolf movement, then they have, at least they feel empowered that change can happen through movement, and it doesn't have to always be practitioner creates the change. That our job is to educate and to empower our clients. And I think that's what's beautiful about Rolf movement is it's such great homework, and it really helps move along the changes. And but that's why I was kind of going back into, because I think right now in the Rolf movement world, there's a lot of buzz around the tonic function. And what is that? And I think we kind of touched on it a little bit in just a moment ago, but do you have any kind of definitive definition of Hubert's influence of the tensegrity and the tonic models?
I think that tonic function, the simplest image for me is that the back line of the body, the postural muscles, hold back from the rest of the body being able to express itself. So it's whatever is the tonic function part of the body prevents the rest of the body from being free. So what the movement education piece is about is finding ways through, I think, sensory input to encourage or invite the tonic muscles to let go. Okay. So if the tonic muscles can release their grip on the person's body, then the person can be more free to be tensegrally organized. Does that make sense? So that makes
a lot of sense.
They're really all part of the same thing. That mandala image is basically a picture, a map of improving tonic function and making the tonic function more adaptable, if you will, because there's their adaptability principle. And part of that is one of the ways that you release those tonic muscles is by improving the person's relationship to the ground and to the space. So people who are more spatially oriented are tonically held up, and people who are more ground oriented are tonically held down. So that you can see that in the way they move. So for each person, you want to to share experiences that give them the opposite pole, which then improves their tensegral organization.
Thank you for that. And I would like to share or say something to say if I'm understanding it correctly, and if not, please do correct me. And also for the sake of some listeners, that when we're talking about tonic, we're kind of talking about, and this isn't totally true through the whole entire body, but the tonic is a representation of the smaller muscles that are primarily responsible for stability. Mm-hmm. And that what this tonic function model is encouraging is don't abandon the fact that we need these muscles for stability, but we don't need to necessarily be rigid. That there's even in these muscles that offer stability, because of the tensegrity capability, we can still be spacious, even in a moment that we may need to collapse in a fetal position or arch or curl. that there's a way to do it with openness, even when we're shrinking?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a time to be really crunched down into the ground and a time to be escaping into the space, and sometimes we need to do one or the other. He used to say, can you stand and fight, or do you run away? And there are times for both of those things. There are times to be either one or the other. The thing is to be adaptable, which would be that the tonic muscles are able to serve you in the way that's appropriate in that moment, whatever it is. So I don't think it's about going around being spacious and open all the time. I think that would be kind of unrealistic in the world, but to be able to be reopen after periods when we have to close. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask Hubert if he thinks that's correct, but that's what I make of it.
I've emailed him. We haven't got him on the talk, but we'll see. There is also something to do with the tonic and the phasic having to do with slow twitch and fast twitch. There's more of a physiological, but we don't have to go into that because that's not my specialty. Yeah,
it's not mine either. It's not mine. But I think the general idea that we've got kind of the general idea of it here, and it's profound. Even if you don't understand all the physiology and biology and neurology of it. And I think sometimes people get seduced by the kind of intellectual interestingness of all that, and don't just and feel like if they don't understand everything about the twitches, that they can't, go ahead and be practical about it. But I don't understand all that stuff. I've read it a million times and it just goes right through one ear and out the other. But I think I pretty much get the basic idea in a way that is useful for the ordinary person.
Sure. You may not cognitively grasp it, but you embody it. And then to some extent, that's more valuable.
Well, I don't know. But I made a list for you guys because I thought, this question of what is Rolfing movement comes up. It comes up. So I made a list of what it is. Would you like to hear it?
I would love it.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
Do we need a drum roll? Do we need a drum roll for Mary Bond's?
So I think what it is it's the Rolfing principle. It's anything that serves the Rolfing principles. Okay. And it's Hubert's ideas about the perceptual organization, effects, coordination. And then there were some structural exercises that Ida Rolf borrowed, the toes up, foot up, all those little hinge movements. They're useful. They're really useful. And then there's number 4 is interventions that were developed by various movement faculty collaborating with each other over the years. And there were all kinds of things. There were table work, and there was something called jostling, I think, at one point, where you sort of jiggled people. I never experienced that, but I understand how that could serve the goal of the principles. And by bringing sensation into the body, which is part of Hubert's teaching, then it serves to service the tonic function, right? So I think also we borrow from other modalities. That's my 5th point. Ida certainly studied yoga, and part of her whole idea of Spannung had to do with the yoga idea of opening the joints. I borrow from Pilates because sometimes I think historically structural integration has been about releasing tension, but that many imbalances have to be corrected by strengthening underused structures. So sometimes I think we need to strengthen and tone something rather than help it release. And then, so I think we could borrow from Tai Chi, we could borrow from Alexander Feldenkrais, as long as it serves the Rolfing principles, right? And then there's number 6 is the practitioner creativity. You make stuff up in the moment because you see what somebody doesn't feel, or you see what they don't understand, and you think, I wonder if this would work. Let's try it. And you just do. And sometimes it works. And then it becomes a technique because it worked, right? And then
that's my favorite part of any session is like when I do something and I have no idea why and it works.
Right. And the key, my last point is that we work to integrate these changes into the client's culture and their daily life. And really, if we don't do that, we haven't closed. We haven't done closure. We haven't obeyed that principle. So that's what I think Rolfing movement is.
That is a very thorough and all-encompassing explanation. It's lovely because we've had quite a few other Rolf movement teachers, pioneers, and to help bring understanding to what Rolf movement is. And I think you really captured how it's quite diverse, but there is a structure. There's a line to it. Yeah. So speaking of borrowing,
I think almost anything could be Rolfing movement. I mean, you could teach a kettlebell workout and it would be Rolfing movement if you did it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Nikki might do that. Nikki, you do kettlebell.
Well, I do. And so the funny thing is with borrowing, I was definitely really inspired by Rolf movement, hence why I wanted to do the dual certification. And coming out of it, as much as I knew it was impactful, I did struggle with trying to teach it and had already been a student of Pilates, yoga, a bunch of other mind-body movement modalities. I went and furthered my education by getting certified in a lot of these because that's what I wanted. I wanted a hefty tool bag to start applying some of these Rolf movement to support the structural work that was happening on the table. So I'm really big at borrowing. And but one thing that I've been borrowing that I would love to pick your brain a little bit about is I borrow from you is the one that I picked up from the supple spine workshop that you did not too long ago. Because I've been doing it with lots of people and it really is clicking for them on feeling into contralateral movement or the rotations that happen with walking. And so that exercise that you had us do where we're just like micro weight, micro attention into the heel of one foot and then on the other foot dropping weight into the front of the foot. And how that on a very subtle level, but able to feel it, how that starts to put us in just with that slight weight differentiation puts a rotation in. How did you come up with that? Was that a borrow? Did you?
Absolutely. I absolutely borrowed that. And I think I borrowed it from somebody who borrowed it from somebody else, I think, and honestly, I don't know for sure, but I co-taught a movement training with Ashwan Xiao, who I don't think teaches for us anymore. She's in Australia. And Ashwan taught that in the class, not exactly that way, but, basically that idea of contralaterality coming up through the feet. And I think she probably got it from Monica Kaspari, is my guess, because they were close. And I think Monica probably got it from Hubert, but we can't ask her because she's passed away. But, it feels like part of that whole I don't know, library of sensory input, because that's what that is. It's bringing the impression in so that you can find it in the expression of your walking. Right?
You may have noticed I stood up for that because I wanted to try it when you were talking. It's really interesting because I was walking today and I realized I have this twist I'm rotated to my right, and actually just standing and playing with that it's helping me figure out how I can actually untwist my spine. So I'm going to now play with that in various different ways in the next few days or weeks and figure some stuff to help me. So I'm just grateful for that. And then actually it leads me into something that we want to talk about, which I think is really a good lead in, which is how do people work with you now?
Oh, well, I'm pretty much doing online work. I'm coaching online. I have on my website, healyourposture.com is my website. And it says work with Mary, and there's a drop down and you can coach, personal coaching for yourself. Or I also have a mentoring program, so I could mentor people, SI practitioners or other people. And then I'm teaching some online classes. Those are also on the website. I do it just a couple times a year, but that's what Nikki was talking about. She took the articulate spine class in August, and I'm slowly but surely going to edit those recordings of Zoom and try to, make them look a little more smooth. And Zoom is not always conducive to, especially if you're trying to use PowerPoint or something. The pictures don't always go up, seamlessly. But anyway, we're editing the glitches out, and those little by little, those workshops will all be available for purchase at a big discount. But yeah, so I'm teaching these workshops. I'm really motivated to share all these ideas as broadly as I can. I think they're too important and too helpful to keep them within the structural integration community. I think that's just silly. And so most of the people actually in my classes have been not structural integrators. They've been Pilates and yoga and Rosen method and chiropractors and I don't know, all kinds of people. And yet the Rolfers who did sign up found them useful too. So, but my wish is same thing with the books. I'm trying to share these ideas with people who can use them, because otherwise not enough people get Rolfed. A minuscule amount of people get Rolfed. But the somatic education field is, I think, burgeoning. And I think it's in response to this sagittal plane that we're all living in. I think that the notion of embodiment is a desperate need that people who have a shred of consciousness can recognize in the world we live in. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. That's great. And I think that's a great place for us to also wrap up. I'm really, really grateful for this, your time, this information. It's going to be hard to go to sleep because I have so much going on right now that I'm really excited about that I just picked up from today. And I'm excited for all the people who will listen once I edit this. We will share your links to your books and to your website and to other. I'm just really grateful for your time and your knowledge and all of your time that you've dedicated to this art. You've made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and that's great. Well, thanks for saying that. Yes, I also feel very grateful. Like I said earlier on, I've known about you. I have dialed in on the various offerings that you've made available on YouTube and all that.
And I do believe, I mean, in my opinion, you are a Rolf movement superstar because you have the skill to, just like what you were just saying of offering this to the general public, that you're able to take this information and really share it beyond just the structural integrators that want to nerd out and who already have a language around this. That right. You have, I mean, and I do believe that's a superstar skill to be able to take this information and inspire just general people to want to move differently and encourage that and explain why the benefits for that is. So it's a real honor to have this virtual meet and conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be in a conversation. It's been very fun. So go to sleep now, Andrew. You can put it all aside. You can listen to the thing, tomorrow. It'll still be there.
I will edit it in the weeks to come. But before I go to bed, I have to the most important thing I have to do is to call my wife.
Okay, do that.
But thank you so much, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more about Mary and read her blog at healyourposture.com or reach her directly at mary@healyourposture.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you'd leave a positive review of the podcast and subscribe to it through the platform of your choice. When you do this, it really helps other people find us, and we greatly appreciate your support. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at Touching into Presence. Bye-bye.